Welcome, everyone. I am Adeshewa Josh, and this is Africa Matters. Contrary to popular belief, about 85% of Africans who migrate do so within the continent. But the few who try to make their way to Western nations often face deadly journeys through the desert. This week, we assess the impact of the Nigerian junta's decision to repeal a law meant to curb migrant smuggling from Africa to Europe. In Niger, helping to transport undocumented migrants trying to find their way to Europe has been illegal for the last 8 years. But that's now changed after General Abdurrahman Tiani revoking the law aimed at combating migrant smuggling along a crucial route to Europe. The junta is reacting to sanctions imposed by the EU following a coup in July that ousted the democratically elected government. Let's take a closer look at how the situation has evolved. Until 2015, the Agadez region in Niger was a key transit point for most sub-Saharan migrants, with an estimated 4,000 people heading to Europe through Libya and onto the Mediterranean every week. But in May 2015, a law criminalizing the transportation of migrants through Niger was introduced. People smugglers faced up to 5 years in prison if convicted. In return, the European Union initiated a $5.5 billion trust fund for Africa, with the goal of addressing the root causes of migration. But some felt it was not enough to reduce unemployment in the area. And after the July 26th coup that ousted President Mohamed Bazoum, Western and European nations halted aid for health, security, and infrastructure in Niger. In response, the junta has been reevaluating its ties with former Western allies and reviewed its willingness to prevent irregular migration. The EU's Home Affairs Chief, Ifeanyi Johansen, says that the law worked in Niger's favor.
I've been working extremely close together with Niger, and after they passed this law in 2015, we had a significant decrease on the irregular arrivals, and we had a significant decrease of people losing their lives in the desert. I was in Niger, I went to Agadez, I saw all these search and rescue efforts that they do in the desert to actually make sure that people will not die there, and how they, together with us, are investing in other ways so to prevent these smuggling and these risking of lives of people.
But some residents in Niger's capital, Niamey, have welcomed the move. They say they are already gearing up to restart their business of driving migrants through the desert as they head to Europe. Ibrahim Abu spoke to some of them.
The junta principal argument was that this law is against Niger engagement in regional and sub-regional organization and institution, especially the ECOWAS instrument, which recognizes the right to all African and to all West African to travel around West Africa without barrier. And also for Nigerian, this is the right, the good reaction after the European Union Parliament decision last week to sanction Niger. This is very conform to Niger dignity, Niger sovereignty.
On one hand, I'm happy about this abolishment. On the other hand, I worry about it as the immigration transportation system is a cause of migrants dying, and this is a very important point. Also, this abolishment can destabilize and bring poverty, violence, sexual abuse, harassment, and many diseases which can affect the local population.
It will reduce risks migrants were taking after the 2015 law was passed. They were taking risks most of the time traveling at night. So instead of exaggerating about this abolishment, we have to think about how to establish a system to better control these zones.
This is how Nigerians are considering this situation, and this decision is very welcome and applauded by Nigerians.
Let's hear more from Dr. Ola Alabi. He is a senior lecturer, African Leadership Center, King's College London. He joins me from London, United Kingdom. Thank you so much for joining the program. Let's start with the fact that the Migration Law 36/2015 was meant to serve as a stopgap for the flow of migrants to Europe. And now that it's been repealed, what will the immediate and long-term implication be?
Thank you. The immediate implication of this, as some of your reports have highlighted, is those who have profited from businesses linked to the illegal transportation of migrants across the Sahara Desert are going to go back to business. That is obvious. But over the long term, we have to ask, can this return to illegal migration in Niger, can it benefit the country over the long term? I don't think so. Partly because countries that have allowed organized crime, because there is a connection between illegal migration to the Sahara Desert and organized crime to the same desert. And of course, we also know, and evidence have pointed to links between organized crime and violent extremism, the activities of extremist groups in the Sahel. So over the long term, it might end up consuming the regime in Niger
So,
because of the connection
so you,
between organized crime and violent.
so what you're basically saying is that Niger's junta, that repealing this law could actually backfire.
It could backfire. What the junta is trying to do is trying to buy legitimacy from the people. It's trying to pivot to populist policies that will buy support from the citizens. On the one hand, that is for internal purposes, but externally, it's looking for new allies. It's pivot to the east. It's in discussion with the Wagner Group. It's already in alliance with junta in neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso, and they are all as a whole, they are pivoting to new allies. They are looking towards Russia in this instance.
Dr. Ismail, what then would you say about activists and international organizations who say the law in the first place is a violation of human rights? People should have a right to move wherever they choose, albeit legally. That putting a stopgap would actually not fix this Europe migration issue, which, to be honest with you, most Africans actually migrate within the continent, 85%, according to reports and data.
Yeah, it's caught between the rock and the hard place. There are borders, and the borders serve a purpose. And the borders are linked to the idea of having a country, having a nation state, having citizens and the rest. Granted that colonialism in Africa disrupted the organic evolution of African societies and African states. But nonetheless, despite that destruction, we have borders. The African Union has decided to maintain those borders for specific reasons. Migration has to be managed, it has to be documented, and you also have to ensure that migration does not create security problems and challenges for you. Part of what activists have complained over the years is also the ownership of that law. Was the law owned by Niger? Was it owned by Africans themselves, or was it something bought with European aid money, being dangled at Niger at the time? Yeah, there's an argument to be heard about that. But beyond that, let's look at Niger as a country. What is in its best interest? What the junta is doing, trying to bring an economy back that was putting money in the pockets of people, making the junta to be popular. That can serve the purpose of that junta in the short term. But over the long term, is this a sustainable economic activity in Niger?
Dr. Ismail, let me quickly come in here. You did mention the management of migration, and I assume that the revocation of this law may affect the $5.5 billion trust fund pledge by the EU on account of this law. If yes, what does that say about the cash in exchange for keeping migrants at bay strategy we've seen many countries engage in the last decade? Is it working?
It's not going to work. It's not going to work. You cannot buy the interest of a country by dangling money at them. You have to genuinely look at acting, get help, so working with them to act in their self-interest. I think there is a middle ground, there is a middle point about what can be done to the rural communities in the Sahel up to Agadez. How do you replace an economy that is flourishing in organized criminal activities or activities that support criminal networks? How do you replace something different with something better? And I think just handing over money to the government of Niger or to the junta is not going to do the trick. There has to be a middle ground of how to bring about a new kind of, evolve a new economy that can replace this. And there are many initiatives, many possibilities in that, regard. Irrigation projects can be initiated that can solve the farming or agriculture, or that can revive the agriculture in that part of the world over a long period of time, that can slowly and gradually bring about a new economy. But
Right.
simply that money, and also, part of the blunders that the EU has also done in this regard was to focus on border security, all in a bid to address the migration crisis in Europe, rather than genuinely looking at what is in the best interest of Niger. I'm sure that Niger, where it has that means, that capacity, we also want to stop this because of the connection between this migration moving to Agadesh and organized crime and violent extremism. But if this is not, the ownership of this initiative is not Niger driven, if it's driven by EU money, by EU's obsession with trying to stop the migrant crisis and the rest, then you're always going to have a flip-flop, as we have seen. A new regime will come in because it wants to buy local, legitimacy, decides to change the law. But ultimately, the regime can think of it in the short term, but over the long time, it will have to face the consequences of this.
Thank you. Well, that's quite interesting. Dr. Ola Alabi, thank you so much for joining Africa Matters. He is a senior lecturer, African Leadership Center, King's College London. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Still to come here on Africa Matters.
I'm Fungisai Moronga in Lusaka, and I'll be exploring communities that are holding traditional healers and other healthcare professionals accountable for misinformation surrounding ARV education amongst adolescents in Zambia.
And I will show you how ex-convicts and former drug addicts in Eswatini are experiencing a new lease on life thanks to an innovative program which helps them reintegrate into society using horses.
The lakes of Kenya's Great Rift Valley provide livelihoods for millions of residents and are a major tourist attraction. But in recent years, their levels have been steadily rising, wreaking havoc on those who live on or near their banks. Alexandra Maala sought to find out how locals are coping with the changing tides of Lake Baringo.
Eunice once called this tomato farm in Marigat's Loropili village home. As a young girl, she often made the 10-kilometer walk to nearby Lake Baringo to fetch water for her family or play with friends. Little did she know that years later, they would be forced out by the same lake's rising levels.
And we moved to 2019 because of the water rising of Lake Baringo. We came back just to dig or to cultivate this farm. We leased out to somebody to lease out to cultivate for 1 year.
Locals say the lake's expansion began a decade ago, but unprecedented rainfall in December 2019 saw things take a turn for the worse. Kenya's meteorological department says there has been even more rain in the country's highlands in recent years, with a yearly average now well over 650 millimeters.
Residents of villages in Marigat expected that when the rain stopped, the lake would retreat. Instead, it kept rising. In March 2020, as COVID spread, schools across the country were shut down and they reopened 7 months later. By that time, 11 in Marigat had been completely submerged. Business owners have also fallen victim to the unrelenting waters, often losing their stock.
Thousands of people have been forced to relocate from the homes and businesses they knew for years. Some, having no other option, settled on government-owned property on higher land in Marigat town. The internally displaced people's camp there currently hosts 500 families who lost not only their homes but also their livelihoods. Having felt firsthand the impact of the global climate crisis, Eunice saw the sweeping tides of the lake as a call to action.
At Wanchandege, we train them on alternative livelihood, that is now the kitchen garden and even, or we can call it the farming. Because generally coming from pastoralists, community. We train them from how to cultivate. We give them basic needs on how to cultivate, how to do it, how to irrigate, how to plant, and even how to do it, how to maintain the kitchen garden until it's ready to be harvested. So we give them knowledge.
Aside from the technical know, she also provides seeds to the communities.
At first, she used to give us food. Then she later decided to teach us how to grow our own food using simple resources. She taught us how to sustain ourselves as women.
Many locals are afraid to go back to their land despite the water receding and have started leasing it to out-of-town farmers. This, according to experts, is a problem in itself.
They're using a lot of fertilizer and a lot of chemicals to suppress the weeds, to suppress the insect, the aphids, finally polluting the soil. And that irrigation, that water will drain to the lake, finally become an ecological disaster to the fisheries resources.
A Kenyan government report in 2021 conceded that tectonic activity was partly responsible for the rising tides. But it concluded that greater levels of rainfall caused by the climate crisis are ultimately to blame. Alexandra Maala, Africa Matters, Kenya.
As the world marks World AIDS Day on December the 1st, we head to Southern Africa. Despite ongoing efforts to combat HIV and provide accurate information about medication, traditional healers and clergymen remain the preferred choice for treatment in many African countries. But a group of young people in Zambia have now taken it upon themselves to hold traditional healers accountable for spreading misinformation. Fungisai Maronga has that story for us.
In Lusaka, a group of young people is actively working to educate adolescents and parents about HIV. Their goal is to increase the access to clinical treatment and contraceptives.
Our mission has been to engage more with traditional healers and also to educate them more on the importance of them bringing adolescents and young kids to the hospital in case they have symptoms of HIV and other symptoms that might likely be HIV.
Medical professionals help the youth in engaging traditional healers and teenagers on misconceptions surrounding HIV and antiretroviral drugs.
More especially with the adolescents, they don't have the full information about ARVs. They don't know to say when you are put on this treatment, you prolong your life. Because remember, we've got 5 goals of therapy. While we're talking about reduction of viruses in the body, improvement of life, and also improvement of the immunological functioning.
In Zambia, many people visit traditional healers before going to clinics, and it's no different for young people.
We have seen that the adolescents believes that it's good to go for a traditional healer than to just visit the healthcare for their services, and that they believe that ARVs would be taken for life than where they are just given some traditional medicines by a traditional healer, which will just be taken maybe in a short period of time.
Most youths in Kanyama believe that sexual reproductive health and right issues such as maybe HIV and all that were mostly spiritual.
But it's a problem that also goes beyond the Zambian capital.
With an estimated 1.4 million people living with HIV and 1.1 million undergoing treatment, Zambia has an 11.1% HIV prevalence rate. 50% of Zambia's annual recorded new infections are among adolescents and young adults. UNICEF asserts that continuous oversight is necessary regarding the financing and execution of Zambia's existing laws and regulations. Less than 1 in 5 teenagers are using HIV testing or contraceptive services, an indication that access is still low.
To enhance healthcare services for the community, the youth are now looking into whether the local clinics are able to meet their specific needs.
So we go undercover, we disguise ourselves as young adolescents, accessing services. We get to hear from them. If they are rude or anything, we write a report and then we discuss again about it.
Efforts to tackle HIV in Zambia have long been hampered by a lack of information on proper medical treatment. Now young people are bridging that gap to tackle an illness that places them at higher risk. Fungisai Moronga, Africa Matters, Lusaka, Zambia.
And speaking of bridging the gap to a better lifestyle, we head to Eswatini now, where the lives of an ex-con and a former drug addict have changed drastically during the process of being reintegrated into society. This has come with the help of some horses, as Nokukanya Musi reports.
Made up of congregated metal homes, as well as straw and mud huts, the sprawling informal settlements of Masagweni, Elwandle and Emangwaneni on the western side of the Kingdom of Eswatini are areas with high rates of crime, poverty, unemployment and drug abuse. Ex-convict Siposetu Mabuza and former alcoholic Bafana Gunene grew up here and they were lured into crime and drug abuse. However, equestrian therapy has changed everything and given them a new lease on life.
I began leading a life of crime to finance my habits. I was arrested many times for theft and assault. Years later, I decided to turn my life around because I could see how much pain I was causing my family. Reintegrating back into society after leading a life of crime was difficult for me until I was introduced to horse riding. I found that when I was around horses, I was more at peace and able to deal with my personal demons. I found it very therapeutic.
After the introduction of horse riding, I've never ridden a horse before. And eventually, I stopped drinking alcohol. Now I feel happy where I am. I'm a horse rider. I also do permaculture.
Although there are various programs for young people within the correctional service system in Eswatini, the extent to which they are focused on rehabilitation is unclear. With the help of young instructors such as Bandile Badges, horse riding is changing lives by rehabilitating ex-convicts and former drug addicts. So far, 1,700 people have gone through the program since 2015.
Many of youth in our rural developing communities have lost hope and their zeal for life. It was important for me to help them through the steady process of recovering to reintegrate back into society. We need more resources and horses to expand as much as we can. So with the right attitude, focus and determination of working smart, anything is possible.
Data from the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime shows that cannabis is the most common drug, followed by cocaine with more than 14,000 users. Few people can access the treatment they need, but Bandile Badges has shown that even those who have made mistakes in the past can find redemption through the power of compassion and second chances. Globally, horse therapy has been shown to be an effective treatment for addiction and mental health disorders. These two young men are proof it can save lives and rehabilitate even the toughest offender. Nokukanya Musi, Africa Matters, Lukakaneni, Eswatini.
Pastoralists across West Africa's Sahel region are using technology to adapt to the changing climate. Livestock herding is practiced by more than 50 million people around the world, but the loss of grazing land due to rising temperatures has forced many to abandon it. However, Senegal, a group of innovative farmers there, have found a way to keep the lifestyle alive. Shoaib Hassan has the story.
Packing up after a long day in the field. Before tending to themselves though, Amadou, Altine, Ndai and his family ensure the livestock are safe and secure.
There is a definite bond between the herder and his flock, especially when you're alone in the forest. They get used to you and come to lie down beside you, and when you call them, they come running to you.
Pastoralism has been a way of life for Senegal's Muslim Fulani people for more than 1,000 years.
I was born into pastoralism, and since then I have known nothing else. It's the only job I've had. It's an activity I've never minimized because when I was born, I found cows and sheep here. I'm not complaining too much. I'm just confronted with the difficulties of life, like climate change, that my parents never knew.
But the Fulani are adapting to the challenge. Many now use phones to call groups further ahead and share information about weather conditions and best grazing areas. The devices are kept ready and charged thanks to a solar panel connected to a battery. Experts say this adaptability is what has allowed these pastoralists to survive for centuries, but the challenges keep on increasing. Shoaib Hassan, Africa Matters.
And this week, we explore Saly, a seaside resort area in Senegal. The small city is well known as one of the top tourist destinations in West Africa. It's also part of the draw for the more than 1 million visitors who visit the country each year. Let's take a closer look.